Hallows Eve, a joyous day, with costumed kids and trick-or-treats. The ghouls and goblins come to play, but some are there not for the eats. Beware the spirits that come this night, for ye not know if they be foe or friend. Some are content to give you a fright, but others there to bring your end. I just remember being so excited. It was the year 2000 and the Halloween season was in full swing. The air was getting cooler, the leaves were changing color, and the best part of all, the Halloween festivities were set to begin all around town. I was born and raised in a podunk little town right in the middle of Kansas. We had one high school, one gas station, and one little grocery store that was usually the hangout spot on the weekend. And of course, we had cornfields as far as the eye could see. Throughout the rest of the year, finding anything fun or productive to do was nothing short of a miracle. But during Halloween, well, let's just say we knew how to throw a Halloween party. Every year was even better than the last. See, in our town, Halloween wasn't a one-day holiday. It started October the 1st and lasted through the end of the month. Each and every day consisted of some kind of celebration, whether it was a church festival, a house party, or a scavenger hunt through the cornfields. Even just having a night in watching horror movies with a small group of friends made the season so much fun. There was always something to do during the month, but nothing compared to Halloween night itself. While trick-or-treating was a given, once it got dark, that's when the real Halloween fun began. The annual Halloween Horror Festival was unlike anything anywhere else. Smack dab in the middle of the downtown streets was a party straight out of the movies. There was a parade of lighted floats and costumed people dancing atop them. Candy rained down like hail in a thunderstorm, and most of the downtown shops stayed open late, offering some kind of Halloween special or treat for purchase. Just down the street was a small cornfield owned by Farmer Joe, who would prepare a new maize through the stalks every year. If it was worth your time, you could get lost in there for hours. The event attracted thousands of tourists across the Midwest, and sometimes even further, who wanted to take part in the legendary festivities. People in town often joked that the yearly festival is what kept the town from going under. I was too young to care one way or another, but as I look back now, there was probably a lot of truth in that statement. The crown jewel of the entire night was the Halloween Horror Haunt. The haunt was a standard haunted attraction that took place in an old 3-story abandoned bank. The building was owned by Jimmy and John Curtis, some rich, middle-aged brothers who, after inheriting their parents' fortune, never worked another day in their lives. One thing was for certain, though. They loved Halloween. That meant that they spared no expense in making the haunt the scariest, most exciting haunted house in the entire country. For years, rumors circulated that the attraction was so terrifying that nobody was able to complete it, even earning visits from several documentary crews to determine if that was indeed reality. And while, of course, it wasn't, that didn't change the fact that it was truly one of the scariest places on Earth. When I say that things felt so real, I'm not exaggerating. A team of amateur yet still talented actors were brought in yearly with access to top-of-the-line makeup and costumes. The prosthetics and props were about as close to lifelike as possible, with several tourists even calling the police one year to investigate what they thought was a real body. It turned out to be nothing more than an overly committed actor who wouldn't break character for anything. But this year was the Halloween of the new millennium. Chatter in town was nonstop about how the Curtises would turn up the heat even more in trying to top the haunt in years past. It was Friday the 13th when advertisements for the haunt began to appear. Walking to school that morning felt extra exciting. Every light pole on every street corner for miles featured a flyer. On the flyer was a clown with a machete and an evil-looking pig with a butcher's apron and a chainsaw. The caption at the top was in big, bold letters simply reading, "The Final Haunt." The letters were painted in red and written individually on the hundreds of flyers strewn across town, making each one a unique piece of work. It was all the talk at school that day as us kids swapped stories and ideas about what we thought the Final Haunt meant, or what big surprise the Curtises would spend all of their money on this year. Theories ranged from being forced to eat live spiders to having to conduct a seance. Some theories were way out there, but I don't know that anything could have truly prepared us for what was to come. All of that brought us to Halloween night. I sat on my couch in the living room counting down the minutes until the sun would finally set behind the cornstalks. By this point, the knocks on the door from trick-or-treaters was growing fewer and farther between as most of the small children would be heading home now, readying themselves for bed. But for me and my friends, the night was just getting started. I finally got the okay from my parents to switch off the porch light and lock the front door. I ran up the stairs and began to apply my face paint for my costume. This year's costume was a simple one, just my personal take on a spooky skeleton complete with whiteout contacts. I was putting the finishing touches on my face paint when the doorbell rang. I ran downstairs to meet my group of friends. There was Toby, Abby, Mick, Gus, and Janine. As planned, they had on their various costumes ranging from a creepy doll to some kind of angry bear. "You ready to go, man?" Mick asked from behind the bear mask. "For sure," I said. "Let's get going before we miss anything." I turned back into the house, yelling up the stairs at my parents who were getting ready for beds themselves. "I'm heading out, guys. Don't wait up for me." I grabbed my keys, locked the door behind me, and the 6 of us began the short trek to the downtown party just a few blocks away from my house. You could see the flashing neon lights flickering and pulsing as thousands of celebrating people passed in front of them.
"Oh man, I am so excited,"
Janine said.
"This is going to be so sick." "I know, right?"
Abby responded quickly.
"It's going to be next level this year."
"Yeah, supposedly there's trap doors, more actors, and all kinds of stuff to disorient you, making you feel like you can't get out,"
Mick said. As they were chatting, I stopped in the middle of the street. I felt like I'd caught something in my peripheral vision, a figure of some sort standing at the end of the alley, facing us with something in its hands. I quickly turned, trying to catch a glimpse of it, but by the time I looked, the figure had already vanished. I came to the conclusion that I'd just imagined it, but I must have been staring an awkwardly long time as Janine's voice interrupted my thoughts.
"Jamie, you coming?"
Yeah, sorry, I thought I saw something."
I watched my friends as they continued onward down the road toward downtown. I turned again, facing down the alleyway, and listened closely. I thought I could hear something, a ringing sound, something that sounded like metal tapping against the chain-link posts. I stared for a moment longer, but shook it off as I ran to catch up with my friends. It could have been anybody, just headed to the festival themselves. When we arrived, things were in full swing. People were carrying around all manner of Halloween-themed ciders, baked goods, and candy apples. The parade had already started, so we posted up on one of the street corners watching as several of the floats passed by, flinging handfuls of candy at all of us in the crowd. Gus and Toby stuffed their pockets with all the chocolate pieces they could get their hands on while the rest of us hooped and hollered looking for the next thing to take part in. I faced straight ahead at the floats as they passed by, admiring all the work that must have gone into making them. But my attention was soon stolen again as another float passed by. Through the gap between 2 floats across the street and behind the crowd, I could see a tall person in what looked like a clown costume and clown face paint. The man held a long machete in his right hand and seemed to be staring right at me. A cold chill ran down my spine as the thing eyed me from far off, tilting his head back and forth as if studying me. I shook my head, hoping he would look away as each float passed by, but he remained steadfast.
"Sick, right?"
Toby asked, putting his arm around me and pointing at the clown across the street.
"Yeah. Sick,"
I said, still trying to determine why the man wouldn't break his gaze. But I soon reminded myself that there were hundreds, if not thousands of people walking around us. I convinced myself he wasn't looking at me, but just admiring the parade like everyone else.
"Come on, guys, let's see if there's a line yet or we're going to be here all night," Toby said.
I turned away from the clown finally and looked toward the entrance of the haunt. I ran with my friends as we made to stake our claim in line, running along the sidewalk of the street. For a moment, I lost all thought of the evil clown when out of nowhere, a large man in a pig mask and a butcher's apron covered in fake blood stepped out from the adjacent alley revving a chainsaw. I fell to the ground as he stood over me, revving the chainsaw in my face. My friends laughed and chided me as I watched the pig walk away, staring me down as he half-heartedly continued his chainsaw shtick at a couple more people.
"That was awesome, wasn't it?"
Toby said, guffawing like a villain in a teenage drama as he helped me to my feet.
"People really are taking it to the next level this year."
I couldn't stop looking at the pig as he walked away, still eyeing me, but what scared me even more was seeing him step onto the curb and post up next to the clown holding the machete. The 2 of them seemed to stare me down for what seemed an eternity before turning and continuing to harass other people.
"You okay, Jamie?"
Abby said, linking her arm through mine.
"Yeah, I'm fine. Let's just go get in line."
When we got to the haunt, there was only a small group of 4 people in front of us, but the attraction still hadn't opened yet. We waited in line patiently for almost an hour, which seemed much longer considering I spent the whole time looking back and forth over my shoulder to see which of the clown or the pig was going to try and terrorize me again.
"Just relax, Jamie,"
Gus said.
It's just the two characters from the flyers. They're actors. Yeah, man, Mick said. You know, the more you give them a reaction, the more they're, it's open, guys, we're next. Looking back on it now, truer words had never been spoken. We listened as the first group had entered through a cloud of fog and blinding strobe lights. The doors closed behind them, swallowing them up into whatever came next. It didn't take long for the blood-curdling screaming to start. It seemed more real. I didn't know how to explain it, but then, as I listened more closely, I could have sworn I heard the whirring of a chainsaw coming from inside. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't feeling edgier than normal. We handed over our tickets and the 6 of us entered the old bank, walking into the strobe and fog. The door closed behind us, and all of the playful and excited cheers of the Halloween season disappeared behind it. The building was empty, quiet, and just like in the movies, almost too quiet. We turned down the first makeshift hallway, but despite going slowly, from what we could tell, there was nothing in there. No actors, props, or anything so far.
Is this it?
Abby asked, a suddenly nervous quiver in her voice as we turned in the next direction the makeshift haunt led us in. Suddenly I could hear screams in the distance, clearly coming from within the building, but a good distance from where we were at now. We stopped cold, listening to the screaming, and the unmistakable roar of the chainsaw which seemed to suddenly bring the screaming to a stop. Shortly after, a clanking on something metal came to me from my right. We turned down another hallway and saw that it seemed to finally open up, but as I looked down it, I could see the same clown from outside silhouetted in the darkness, with what was clearly a machete in his right hand. Guys, we need to leave, I said, doing little to hide the panic in my voice. I turned on my heel and started trying to find my way back. Relax, Jamie, Toby said with a laugh. It's just a gag. It's clearly just an actor. The supposed actor in the clown suit and makeup inched closer, giggling a sadistic clown laugh, taking every opportunity to tap his machete against whatever he could find. I could swear it sounded like metal on metal, but I didn't want to let myself believe that. It was just a dull plastic prop. It had to be. Toby walked toward him, egging the clown on. Hey, nice costume. What, did they cut the budget this year? The clown didn't respond, only continuing to laugh his sadistic clown laugh. Instead, he stood firm within feet of Toby. Hello? Where are we supposed to go? He continued, inching closer, standing directly in front of the clown now. What are you, dumb or deaf? Toby, knock it off. I don't think you should be saying... Suddenly the clown lifted the machete, placed it against Toby's chest, and sliced downward. Toby fell to the ground for what felt like an eternity. We all fell silent, not knowing what was happening, not knowing if this was all an act that Toby was simply playing up. Toby turned to us on one knee, his face a terrified mask, and glistening blood running down the white bones of his skeleton shirt. Run! He screamed. In shock, we all started to backpedal, still unsure what it was we were witnessing. I saw Toby get to his feet, the gash apparently a surface-level injury simply meant to prove this was no prop. He ran wildly away from the clown, holding his chest tightly with both hands. We scattered like mice at the sound of footsteps. Janine and Abby raced back through the hallways we'd come through with no light to guide them. I ran to my right as I saw an exit out into the openness of the bank. I could see Gus opted to run for the stairs and up the next floor. As I saw Gus pull the door open, he quickly fell backwards as the large pig with the butcher's apron and the chainsaw revved the machine loudly as he raised it over his head, stopping Gus in his tracks between him and the door. Gus shot to his feet and ran in another direction and out of my sight. My first thought was to find a door. Any door that would lead me to the outside and let me find help. But finding one would prove the true challenge, as it seemed all the windows had been barred and the doors themselves boarded up in preparation for this. Before long, all I could hear was the clomping of shoes against the floor, the roar of the motoring chainsaw, and the varying screams that made me start to believe we weren't going to make it out of this alive. I found another hallway and ran down it, using the faint moonlight that snuck in through the barred windows. I dashed into one of the abandoned offices and hid behind a toppled desk far across the other side of the room. I sat and collected my breath, trying to gain my composure and think of a plan. There had to be another way out, or some way I could get a call out to the police. I searched for an old office phone, quickly locating one. I desperately picked up the receiver, knowing full well when I put it to my ear that no sound would come out of it. I dialed the 3-digit number anyway, but my heart sank at the silence that followed. There was no connection and no way to get a call out. My thoughts were interrupted by the sounds of crackling glass beneath a shoe. I looked up to see the clown circling the table, and facing me down, he swung violently toward me. but I was able to duck out of the way just in time, scrambling to my feet and running away in the other direction, turning back over my shoulder to see the clown chasing after me, his sadistic laughter echoing in my eardrums. I needed to find somewhere else to hide, to gather my thoughts. I turned down a long hallway to where several office rooms were located. I had put some distance between myself and the clown at this point and disappeared into one of the offices, backing in slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible. I waited by the door to see if the clown had heard me when I heard a faint whisper behind me.
Jamie.
It was Abby. She peeked the top of her head over another desk and beckoned me over to her. I ran to her just as I heard more debris crackling under the clown's boots. He had to know we were in here. We crouched tightly together behind the desk, doing our best to stay out of sight and quell our anxious breathing. But the reality I feared was that the clown would find us easily once he entered the room. Only a few seconds later I heard the footfalls enter the doorway. He must have known we were in here as he took his time walking closer to where the desk was. The clown circled the desk and stopped. He stared down at us, his clown giggle still going non-stop. He leaned his head back and forth as if teasing us, or making us wait as long as possible before making his next move. Abby, whimpering, grabbed my arm tightly as I could feel the sweat from her palm seeping through my long-sleeved shirt. The clown lifted the machete into the air slowly, preparing to strike down and kill one of us, and then the other. To this day I wonder why I didn't get up and run, why I didn't stand up to try and fight. Perhaps it was exhaustion, but the more I think about it, the more I think it was choosing to die rather than continuing to feel so helpless and afraid as I waited for the clown or the pig to finally finish the job. I closed my eyes, pulled Abby close to me, waiting for the killing blow to come, but it never did. The rest was a blur. I recall a faint voice yelling, "Freeze!" And then, "Get on the ground!" I remember looking up and seeing faint flashing blue and red lights finding the gaps in the barred windows. I remember looking at the clown who was standing with his hands in the air and looking down at me, smiling. Abby held on to me even tighter as we sat frozen on the spot. In what seemed slow motion, I then remember the police officers running around the table and tackling the clown to the ground. And I'll never forget his smiling face and his soulless eyes as the cops cuffed him, violently brought him to his feet, and escorted him out of the building. I don't remember much after that, but somehow my friends and I all survived that night. We were treated for our various injuries, Toby receiving the brunt of it after sustaining a massive gash down his chest, compliments of the clown. 3 of the 4 members of the group just before us weren't so lucky, but the 4th, well, let's just say we owe her our lives. Somehow she'd managed to find a way out and contact help before we'd met the same demise as her friends. The old haunted bank was closed down, being the site of the gruesome scene that Halloween and all. The clown, who was successfully arrested that night, was later identified as none other than Jimmy Curtis, the billionaire owner of the haunt. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in the events of that night. When asked why he did it, he kept it pretty simple. People want to be afraid on Halloween, and we just wanted to give them what they paid for. All these years later, and his mugshot still sends a chill down my spine. The man was smiling with those same soulless dead eyes, the same eyes I saw as he was hauled away from in front of me. Halloween was never the same in our small town again. Needless to say, we were no longer famous for our Halloween festivities. Rather, we'd gained fame for being the gruesome location of a true Halloween horror. Parents were much more cautious of letting their kids out past dark, and the innocence of our yearly celebration just couldn't survive the infamy of that night. You're probably wondering about the massive pig with the butcher's apron and the whirring chainsaw. The unidentified perpetrator, presumably John Curtis, was never apprehended. He somehow slipped through the fingers of the cops that night. His brother, Jimmy, claimed to have acted alone, saying his brother had nothing to do with anything, claiming to have no idea where his brother was or who the pig was that was with him. But we all know the truth. The pig is still out there somewhere, biding his time, waiting for the perfect Halloween when things have all settled down, and just when people think it's safe once again to let their children out alone to finish what he started. And as for me, well, let's just say, even 20-some-odd years later, whenever I hear the sounds of metal tapping metal, or the whirring of anything that sounds like a gas-powered chainsaw, I'm transported back to that night all those years ago, feeling trapped and helpless, as I wait for the final blow, which agonizingly never seems to come.